Welcome to the Hyperpolyglot Activist Learn Languages, Make a Difference. My name is Dr. Carlos Yebra Lopez, and today we're going to explain one of mankind's main mysteries. What is the difference between ser and estar? Let's get it. Ser and estar. So first of all, ser has to do, as a rule of thumb, with permanence, with essence, that which stays the same throughout time, whereas estar has to do with state, current, whereabouts. And so here you have the indicative mood in the present verbal tense. And so let's begin with ser. So we use the verb ser with everything that has to do with the acronym doctor, with descriptions, occupations, characteristics, time, origin, and relationships, plus events and possessions. On the other hand, we use the verb estar in Spanish with anything that has to do with position, location, actions, conditions, and emotions, plus certain idioms, and when the actions are progressive. So let's break it down. Descriptions. We can say, for instance, la clase es grande y espaciosa, meaning the classroom is big and spacious. That's a description of the classroom, right? So we use ser in that context. We say la clase, which is third person singular, it, la clase, es grande y espacioso. The classroom is big and spacious. Now, we also use ser with events. So, for instance, let's suppose there is a concert that is taking place at 6 p.m. We can say, el concierto es a las 6 p.m. El concierto es a las 6 p.m. Again, we use the third person singular because the concert, it, is third person singular. We can also use ser for occupations. So if you work as a teacher or professor, you would say, soy profesor. Now, here we don't need to specify the subject pronoun yo. Why? Because as you can see in the box, each person has its own ending. Therefore, once we write the ending, we already know automatically what the subject pronoun is. Soy is always going to refer to yo. It cannot possibly refer to nosotros, vosotras, tú, ellas. Only yo collocates with soy. Therefore, as soon as we say soy profesor, we already know implicitly that we're talking about the first person singular, yo. Characteristics. If you're trying to define the characteristics of something or someone, you will use the verb ser. So you would say soy alto if you're trying to say I am tall, or sois amables if you're trying to say you're kind in the second person plural. You plural, vosotros or vosotras, sois amables. Again, we omit the personal subject, vosotros or vosotras, because we already know that by virtue of sois, we're already talking necessarily about the second person plural. Time. If we want to express time, even though time changes, we express it with the verb ser. So we say, son las 2 de la tarde, to say it's 2 in the afternoon. Here is very important to bear in mind that all hours in Spanish are used with the plural son. So son las 2 de la tarde, which literally would mean they are 2 in the afternoon, but in English it's singular, it's 2 in the afternoon. In Spanish, time is always plural, except when that time is 1 p.m. or 1 a.m. In that case, we would say for 1 a.m. es la 1 de la madrugada, and for 1 p.m. es la 1 de la tarde. But other than 1 a.m. or 1 p.m., anytime you talk about the specific hour in Spanish, you use son. So you use son las 2 de la tarde, son las 3 de la tarde, son las 4 de la tarde, whereas in English, you will always use the singular it's. That's a difference to bear in mind. Now, if you want to express possession, you also use the verb ser. So if I want to say, it's my YouTube channel, you will say, es mi canal de YouTube. Es mi canal de YouTube. If we want to express origin, we also use the verb ser. So for instance, I'm from Spain would be soy de España. I'm from Mexico, soy de México. There's always already soy because the implication is that it expresses something essential about you. In this case, your origin. And finally, relationships. We also express relationships with the verb ser. So if we want to say they are in a couple since 2017, we would say son pareja desde 2017. If we want to say they are husband and wife since 2005, we would say son marido y mujer desde 2005. All right? So these are the most important categories for ser. Now let's go with estar. As you can see on the screen, we apply estar to talk about position, location, actions, conditions, and emotions. So position. For instance, you're connecting to Zoom, all of a sudden you're upside down. Your interlocutor wants you to change your position so that you look like a normal person, and she or he says, you're upside down, estás boca abajo. So for the purpose of talking about the position of something or someone, we use estar, estás boca abajo. We wouldn't say eres boca abajo, but estás boca abajo. Why? Because we're talking about a state. It is not that you are biologically designed in such a way that you're always upside down. It's a temporary state. Now you're upside down, but you flip the image and you're no longer upside down. So that's why we use estar, because the implication is that your position is a state that can change at any time, rather than something fixed, permanent, like your essence. Now, obviously there are idioms where we use the verb estar, fine. Then there's also location. So for instance, if you want to say that your house or your home is at the Fifth Avenue, you would say mi casa está en la Quinta Avenida. Or yo estoy en New York, I'm in New York. Why? Because in both instances, we're talking about spatial location. Now for actions and things that are progressing, we use the verb estar. So if you want to say we're working hard, meaning it's a work in progress, the action hasn't finished yet, it has already started, but it hasn't finished yet, then we would say estamos trabajando duro, right? If we are learning the difference between ser and estar, but we aren't done with the explanation yet, we would say we are learning the difference. Estamos aprendiendo la diferencia. We are learning the difference. Estamos aprendiendo la diferencia because it is still a work in progress. Now, conditions. If we want to talk about the condition of something or someone, we also use estar, as in, for instance, the radio is damaged. You can say la radio está dañada. Why? Because you're referring to the condition of that particular object. And again, conditions are typically transient, temporary, they change. The radio in this case wasn't always already damaged. Putatively, supposedly at some point it wasn't damaged and now it's damaged. So that's why we express its current state with the verb estar. And finally, emotions. By definition, emotions are also volatile. So if you want to express emotions in Spanish, which is something that changes a lot, you would use the verb estar. So if you want to say Maria is angry, you would say Maria está enfadada. Why? Because now she's angry, but maybe within 2 minutes she's happy. So it's very transient, it's temporary, it's a state that changes. So Maria está enfadada, for Maria is angry. Now, these are the basics. We already have the fundamentals. Let's put them into practice. Now we're going to play a nice little game where you have to choose between the verb ser or estar. Sometimes only one option is correct. Other times, both are correct, but they mean different things. So let's see it. This one, acatarrado, meaning I have a cough. How would you say that? With ser or with estar? ¿Es acatarrado o está acatarrado? Or you would say está acatarrado. Why? Because it's something temporary. It's a condition in which that person is, but that is going to change very soon. Now, abajo. What is this? This is a physical location. Therefore, we use the verb estar. What is this? This is a position in which something is. And for position purposes, we use está, right? So we say está abajo. It is down. Está abajo. What else? Abierto, for something to be open. Is that a permanent thing or is it a temporary state of thing? Think about that. This object is opened, is abierto, but it can be very easily closed, cerrado. So it will be está abierto, right? Está abierto. Now, what about this little girl? All right, she's bored, aburrida. So would you say es or está? Again, is this that can change over time easily or not? If it can, then it should be está. If it can't, then it should be ser. You probably guessed it right, is está aburrida, right? Now she's bored, but maybe now she listens to this exciting explanation and she's no longer bored. So, ella está aburrida, no es, está aburrida. What about this fellow? Anciano. Is it es anciano or está anciano? This one is tricky. So anciano means old. On the one hand, it's true that this person wasn't born old, right? Presumably, he was young and then old. But being old is not something that happens overnight, right? You're old for a long period of time, for decades. And that's why we say es anciano. You've known this person as old for a long time, so it's almost as if it were part of his personality. That's why we say es anciano and not está anciano. There's an implication of certain permanence. Caliente, meaning hot. Temperature, by definition, is temperature can change very easily, right? So it's going to be está caliente, right? Está caliente. Now it's hot, but if you leave it 10 more minutes, it's going to be cold. Therefore, we're going to use the verb that we utilize for temporary states. Está caliente. The coffee is hot. El café está caliente. What about this? Cobarde, coward. Is this a trait of personality that is relatively stable, or is this an emotion? This is a personality trait, right? That's why we use ser, es cobarde. Typically, if a person is a coward, it is a coward today, tomorrow, next decade, etc. Yes, sometimes people change, but in Spanish, at least, the implication is that if it's a personality trait, it doesn't change. So, es cobarde, is coward, es cobarde. What about this baby? Contento. Will he be happy for long? What about in 2 hours when he feels hungry? Is he still going to be contento? Probably not. Therefore, it's temporary. We will use está contento. All right. What about this one? Curioso. Again, is this an emotion, a condition, or rather a personality trait? Because if it is a personality trait, then it's going to be with the verb estar. And typically, someone who is curious today, tomorrow, and within a decade. Therefore, es curioso. We could possibly use está curioso in a context where this person is just curious about that specific situation that we're describing, as opposed to being a curious person, a person that has curiosity as one of his personality traits. So yeah, in certain contexts where we're just talking about a specific action, we could say está curioso. For instance, él está curioso de saber su nota en el examen. He's curious about his grade in the exam in that specific context because the object of his curiosity is exclusively his exam grade, so nota del examen. Then está curioso will be correct. But here we're talking about a personality trait. We're not talking about a particular situation. So what about this? Débil. Débil here means weak. So the question here is being weak a permanent trait of this person, or is something that changes easily? Well, typically if you're weak, even if you hit the gym, it's going to take you years to get strong. So the implication is that weakness or strength are rather stable characteristics. Therefore, we use the verb ser, es débil, as we did before in the case of personality traits. Now, desordenado. Again, it depends. Are you talking about something being untidy in a particular situation, like your hotel room is untidy? In that case, está desordenado. Why? Because in 10 minutes you can tidy it up, right? And then it wouldn't be desordenado anymore. However, if you're talking about a personality trait, whether a person normally likes to keep order in his or her life or not, in that case it will be ser, right? Because it's a personality trait, it's stable over time. Now, here we're talking about a particular situation, right? Where the table, the chair, that particular room is not tidy. Therefore, está desordenado. Now, diferentes. So, they are different, but is that difference permanent or temporary? Could they possibly change their life in such a way that these two people would be one and the same? Such a metaphysical question. The answer is no. No, they're always going to be different people. Therefore, it's permanent. Therefore, we use ser. Son diferentes. Ellos son diferentes, right? Son diferentes. Now, doblado, folded. Is this permanently folded, or can this be unfolded relatively easily? It can be unfolded relatively easily, right? Therefore, it's going to be estar. Está doblado. It is folded now, but that can change very quickly. Now, this cake is dulce, meaning sweet. Is this an intrinsic property of the cake, or is this something that could change? Could this cake exist being sour as opposed to sweet? Well, in this case, it is implicitly understood that this cake was always sweet, and unless adulterated, it's always going to be sweet. Therefore, es dulce, es dulce. So in general, for flavors, we're going to use es. We understand that that particular flavor is intrinsic to a given food. For instance, we would say that chocolate es or está dulce. Well, we would say that chocolate, chocolate, es dulce. Why? Because chocolate is intrinsically sweet. Whereas if you're talking about a soup, for instance, whose flavor can change relatively easily, then you will be inclined to use estar because the flavor of that particular food is transient. What about this boy? ¿Es enfermo o está enfermo? Well, presumably he wasn't born sick. Sick is just a certain state or condition in which this person is, but that can change over the course of several days or even hours. Therefore, it's temporary. Therefore, está enfermo. Está enfermo. Maybe today él está enfermo, but not mañana. So it's está enfermo. Vale. What happens with him? Feo. I know now we have cosmetic surgery and all sorts of ways in which we can turn ugly people into rather handsome people, but in Spanish, at least, we still assume that being handsome or being ugly is a rather stable trait. So in Spanish, people son feos or son guapos, son feas or son guapas. So this fella es feo, es feo. Again, being ugly or being handsome is something rather stable. Lion, feroz. Again, lions are kind of intrinsically ferocious, feroz. So it's going to be es feroz, right? Fragile, frágil, frágil. Again, glasses are intrinsically fragile, therefore it's going to be es frágil. Golosa. So people who have a sweet tooth, right? Is that a personality trait or is something that changes from one week to the next one? It's typically stable over time, right? So we're going to say es golosa, right? She's got a sweet tooth. All right, es golosa. What about him? Gordo, again, physical shape is rather stable. It can change, yes, but those changes typically are not overnight. Therefore, él es gordo, fat. Él es gordo, fat. Es gordo, fat. What is this? This is a suitcase and it's grande. Is the fact that the suitcase is grande temporary or kind of intrinsic to the suitcase? Well, it's kind of intrinsic to the suitcase, right? So it's going to be es grande. It's not that the suitcase magically increased in size. What about these girls? Son iguales. Are they iguales? Are they like, for instance, twins? Are they equal? So iguales means equal. Are they actually iguales? Are they actually equal, like real twins? It looks like they actually are. So son iguales, son iguales. Yeah, these people are intrinsically, genetically very, very similar. So they actually son iguales. What about this butterfly? ¿Es libre o está libre? Well, it depends on what we mean. If we say the butterfly está libre, it means that she is free, as in, for instance, she was trapped in a cage and now she's out of that cage and therefore está libre. So there is a condition or state that recently changed. That is the implication if we say está libre. If we say es libre, that is correct as well. But in that case, we will be talking about something intrinsic about the butterfly. As for instance, the fact that because butterflies have enormous wings and they can travel far away, then they are intrinsically somehow freer or more free than other animals that cannot change their location as quickly. So there is something about the butterfly that symbolizes freedom. And in that sense, the butterfly es libre as well. So that's all from me. I hope the difference between ser and estar is now clear. Please let me know if you have any questions, doubts, concerns in the comments down below. And as always, thanks for watching.